Good morning. I'm at the top of Stockman's Lane. The very, very busy Stockman's Lane, heading to the motorway, heading over to West Belfast. There's the Black Mountain towering above. And I'm panning round. I'll pan round this way. This is the entrance to Musgrave Park Hospital. This is the railway bridge. There's the signpost. You're heading out to the right to Finicky there, and the outer ring heads over to Sydenham Bypass, over to Hollywood and Bangor, and left heads down to Lisburn Road. And you could easily pass by this old graveyard across the road. Now I've been in it before. I've done a video on it before. This is Balmoral graveyard, historic graveyard. Most of the graves in here are probably date from the early to mid 1800s, and unfortunately it is a locked graveyard because people come in and ne'er-do-wells have bonfires and drinking parties and such like, so it has to be locked. So you have to apply to the Belfast City Council to get a key to get in here. Imagine you can't even walk around a graveyard, and see the historic graves in it. But I'm not going to let that stop me. There's my means of entry there. So I'm going to actually break into a graveyard this morning. I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I haven't got the time to apply to the City Council for a key or anything else. And I'm a creature of spontaneity, and I want to go and see some of the graves in here. In fact, I want to search for one in particular. So wish me well as I try to cross the road. And this is the crest. There's the old bike sitting there. There's the crest on the outside, and there's Commonwealth War graves in here. So let's see about climbing over. Probably a 67-year-old shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. Right. See you on the other side. So I've just climbed over the wall into Balmoral Cemetery, and as I say, probably a 67-year-old shouldn't be doing this, especially a 67-year-old who has had a hip replacement. And you're into another world in here. You're into a secret garden. And you're into a nature reserve. And as you walk around here, you'll notice, well, down at the bottom end anyway, quite a number of the grave headstones and surrounds have fallen over. And I'm quite surprised at this, because I've been in other graveyards and their grave headstones haven't fallen over. So is there subsidence or something? I can't imagine that they'd fall over because of a wind or anything like that. And there's a lot of war graves in here. Robert Reid, 1918, rifleman, Royal Irish Rifles, 34. And I just can't understand why so many of these headstones are toppled. See, there's one there. There's another one. So the great and the good, the bad and the ugly are all in here. Quite a well-to-do graveyard. You can just tell that by the size of the headstones. And that's a Masonic grave. And this is the second one I've seen. You can tell by the Masonic symbol there. This is quite a famous guy, Henry Cook, the black man, great preacher back in the day. I've done a video on this grave before. The weather has been amazing this past few days. You know, this past 4 days we've had glorious sunshine and there's been a heat wave, and people in Australia and Iowa Flower Ferry will laugh at this because, you know, we are having a heat wave. There's the type of construction that the council have put up. We're having highs of 18. Isn't that marvellous, Flower Ferry? Doesn't come near what you get in Australia. Another toppled grave. Wee bits of plastic to try and keep a headstone from falling. There's another. Another military grave. Private W. Martin, Canadian INF, 26th of August 1916, age 27. And you wonder why he's buried in a Belfast grave. And this is the grave headstone that I have been looking for in the cemetery at Balmoral here. This is the Tod family grave, and quite a prestigious headstone. And the first grave on the looking directly at you is of Maria Isabella Tod, born Monaghan, 1803, died in Belfast, 1876. Having served her own generation by the will of God, she fell on sleep. Not one thing hath failed to all the good things which the Lord your God spake concerning you. All are come to pass, and we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. That's what the inscription says. But it's not Mrs. Tod that I'm interested in, it's her daughter. It's Isabella Tod, May 1836 to December 1896, out of the, let's read this, I have to get down. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. Many daughters here done virtuously, have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. And she did, you know, she did. This lady has left an indelible mark on Belfast and UK and the entire world as regards rights for women. You wouldn't think that, looking at this. She was an Ulster Scots lady, although she described herself as an Ulster woman. She was born in Scotland, but she came over to Ulster, Belfast, in her 30s, and she stayed here and she died here. And she was responsible throughout her life for getting and campaigning for women's rights. She was a Scottish Presbyterian, she was female, and she was Unionist, and she fought for the rights of women. Now, back in the day, most of the suffragettes in Ireland, north and south, were all nationalists, but she was the exception. She was one of a very few number of Unionists who were suffragettes and campaigned for the rights of women. And whenever she came out against the Home Rule Bill, she was ostracised by the nationalist suffragettes who were her former friends, which is quite sad. They parted ways. I suppose it's understandable. Major division. So she moved to Belfast in her late 20s or early 30s, and she was the daughter of a merchant. She was a strong Presbyterian, and she worked for charities and social causes in Belfast from the moment she arrived. She wrote articles. You know, she wasn't sort of this stay at home and do the washing up type lady. She wrote articles, and she wrote them to the Northern Whig and various other magazines throughout the country, and she wrote them anonymously. And she made continuous efforts to repeal acts, to encourage women in education, to encourage women as regards property ownership, and get similar to rights to men. She wanted to galvanise women politically to get involved for change, because she saw that if she didn't do this, women would be constantly tied to the kitchen and not fulfil their potential. So what did she do? She believed women deserved the right to vote. So she was a founding member of the Society for Women's Suffrage, and this led to, in 1871, it led to women in Belfast earning the right to vote in local elections in Belfast. And Belfast was 10 years in front of any other city as regards women voting in local elections. She continued to work hard lobbying for women's rights to the end of her days, and she considered that women should be seen and treated as full members of society. She campaigned for women in the provision of secondary and higher education. She, along with Margaret Byres, who founded Victoria College, she, along with Margaret Byres, campaigned for women in the 1878 Intermediate Education Bill to include girls in the provisions. And then in 1879 there was the University Bill. And prior to that, these moves that she made, she helped influence Queen's University to admit women students for the first time in anywhere in Ireland. And this had a major impact on Belfast society. Women could go somewhere at long last. Women were beginning to be treated the way they should have been treated all along, fairly and with a degree of equality. But there was much work to be done. But, you know, you've got to remember back in the pre-1900, women were subjugated. You know, women were to stay at home and to bear children and to support their husbands. And you know, she was all for women's rights. She joined bars later on in 1874. Well, not later on. She joined bars in 1874 in promoting and founding the Belfast Women's Temperance Society, and they ran tea shops and all sorts of things, non-alcohol, and she was a lifelong teetotaler. She was responsible for the Married Women's Property Bill. She promoted this, you know, this piece of legislation, and that meant that married women's earnings could not be used by their husbands, and that was a big deal back then, because husbands just sort of took the money. So she was a leading suffragette at that time, and she formed in 1872. She formed the Women's Suffrage Society, which became the Irish Women's Suffrage Society. Having secured the local election municipal vote for women in 1887, she further campaigned for complete votes for women. So, you know, as you're passing by graves in any cemetery, some of these people we owe a huge debt of thanks. She went on to form the Liberal Women's Unionist Association of Belfast, and she was living in Botanic Avenue, 71 Botanic Avenue, when she took ill, and she died in 1896. Like she was only 60, and there's a portrait of Isabella Tod in the Ulster Museum that I hope to go down and see if possible. It's painted by Margaret Rothwell, and it hung in one of our libraries, the Belfast Free Library. That might have been Lennon Hall, I don't know. And it hung there in the 1890s. But Margaret Rothwell, a famed artist at the time, painted that, and it is now in the Ulster Museum. So that's all about Isabella Tod, who worked hard lobbying for women's rights and for women to be considered as full members of society. And there's so many interesting graves in this cemetery. And it's such a beautiful, peaceful, idyllic setting. But it's so sad that it's locked up to the general public. And it has to be. I can understand that. So I'm just making my way out again. So, the grave of Isabella Tod. Gone, but not forgotten, in Balmoral Cemetery. And I'm afraid actually the legacy of Isabella Tod has been forgotten. by modern feminists. But I'm doing my wee bit to try and educate them. So now to climb the wall again without wrecking myself. And somebody has kindly placed a wee marker so that I can climb over and jump over the other side. Wish me well. And this is a portrait of Isabella Tod, presumably in later life, and it is found in the Ulster Museum. It was painted by Margarita Rothwell, probably in and around 1890. Isabella Tod has been dubbed Ulster's forgotten radical, and hopefully this wee video of mine will redress the balance a bit. The Ulster History Circle have put up this blue plaque honouring and remembering Isabella Tod, and it's on Botanic Avenue. So next time you're there, look up and check it out. Near where she lived.